Welcome everybody. In this video I'm going to show you how you can do single sign-on using ASP.NET Core without an identity server, right? We are just going to use cookies and most of the stuff is going to be built in. So we have two blank applications, the app, which we want to authenticate, and identity. We can consider it also an app, but you know, it's some external thing that is going to do the authentication. Both of these are empty applications, no dependencies, they're both minimal APIs. So let's go ahead and get started by adding some simple authentication. So in our builder, we would not just add authentication, but make sure we go to the services, right? So we add authentication, we add the cookie authentication, and we can mark it as cookie schema, right? Although let's skip out on that. Also, we want to be able to authorize, so in services, we go ahead and add the authorization services. Both of these parts are going to add some services to the dependency injection container, and then in our middleware, they're going to get surfaced right in the use authentication and use authorization middlewares. We now want two endpoints, one endpoint to log in and one endpoint to grab some kind of secure resource. So first of all, let's go ahead and log in. This is going to be quite a primitive function. We're not going to be using any identity or anything like that. So let's just get the HTTP context in here. We're going to use the sign in function. And we're going to pass in a new claims principal, which is going to have a new array of new claims identity, and the claims identity is going to have an array of claims. So this is going to get crazy pretty quick. So let's go ahead inside our claims. We'll only have a single claim, which of claim types we're going to get a name identifier, which is essentially a user ID. We're then just going to go ahead and put a GUID value in here and just to string that. And then also I want my claims identity to have an authentication schema here. If you don't have a decompiler, you might be a little bit like, what authentication schema do I add here? But here we have the cookie authentication defaults authentication schema. Again, you can pass a string explicitly here, your own string or whatever, like my application constants and authentication schema. But the identity that we're creating here belongs to this schema. And there we go. So this is going to generate this cookie, and we're just going to return okay, that this has been successful. We're not going to test this just yet. Nothing exciting is really happening here. We can go ahead and create our secure endpoint or protected. Let's go for protected. And here we're just going to go ahead and return a secret. This is going to require authorization, and that's pretty much it. In here you can pass policies where you build them inside the add authorization. This video is not so much about the tooling available in ASP.NET Core. This is for this specific setup. The point is we log in, we get a cookie, and now we want to use this cookie to access this application. So we will go ahead, copy maybe about yay much. This application will then want to perform the same task. We want to remove this identity because this is no longer an identity. And we will just maybe remove about yay much. And actually this one, we don't need it as well. So let's import cookie authentication defaults. And there we go. So first of all, let's go ahead and run our identity side. So .NET watch no hot reload. Here we're on the identity side. So if we go to /protected, we're going to get an attempted redirect to the login page, which basically means we're not authenticated. We will then go to the login page. I almost invoked it like a function, but let's actually open the network tab at this point as well and navigate to login. Accidentally added a hash there, but it doesn't matter so much. So in the response headers, we're going to get this cookie, which is then going to get stored in the browser, and well, we can use it, but essentially it gets stored or should get stored for this domain. So if we take a look at it here, the domain value here is localhost. If we duplicate this tab and actually go into the app, so let's just cd app and use the same command, so we'll start up our application. And before we actually do this, let's make sure that we can access the protected endpoint where we are accessing the secret. If we then have the cookie for the local host and we try to go to our app and we try to use this cookie to access this, so we're about to go to protected. Again, let's open up the network tab. You will see that on the protected endpoint, we still send the same cookie, which belongs to the same domain, being localhost. However, the second application just doesn't know how to interpret this cookie. This is where you use the data protection API to share the keys between the applications which create these cookies and are able to basically open them up with the information that they have inside of them, otherwise the process of decryption. Let's first go over to the identity. I'm going to drop down the terminal, and this looks something like this. On our builder, we are going to go to services and we're going to add data protection. On data protection, we're going to set the application name, and this is some kind of unique value to you. The same configuration then goes on the app.program, but there is one thing missing. We haven't specified anything about the keys, and this is where you can persist keys to file system or keys to registry. So you can save keys to files, although I wouldn't call that secure. You can build your own integrations. You can do things like persist them to Redis, and that is what we're going to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and fire up my WSL. I'm just going to go ahead and start Redis, or was it Redis server? Now I have a Redis server running, so Redis CLI. And if we type in something like keys, it will essentially be empty. And from out of the box, we don't have something that says persist keys to Redis. So this is where you would go and look for a package. You can look for data protection. So just look for data protection and maybe something like Redis. And then you're going to see Microsoft ASP.NET Core, Data Protection, Stack Exchange, Redis. Let's go ahead and add them to both of these applications. Go ahead, drop down the packages since this is now installed. So now we do persist keys to Stack Exchange Redis, and then, well, supply our iConnection multiplexer. So how this works is you have a connection multiplexer, connect, and then in here you pass your configuration, which will be the IP, and then the actual port is 6379, and that should be the connection. So all good here. Let's go ahead and take this. We will go to our application and essentially say that this application can do the same thing. It can go ahead and read those keys. Do note that if your application names differ, they're not going to be able to share the keys and essentially reuse the cookies between the applications. So since I have .NET Watch running, both of the applications should compile. The second one has finished now as well. Let's go back to the browser here, and what I'm going to do first is I will go and clear the cookie for this host, because previously it's been done with a different key. But since this is now being persisted, if we take a look at the keys in WSL, there we have an entry, and this is going to be reused between both of the applications. So let's go ahead and make sure that we can't hit the protected endpoint. There we go, we're getting redirected to login. However, our login is here, so let's hit that. Now we have the cookie. Can we hit the protected endpoint? We can. Can we hit one on the other side? Let's go ahead, put this here, and we can as well. And that is for the localhost setup. What about if we actually have domains and stuff like that? Well, we can simulate this locally as well. We don't have to take it to the cloud. I'm going to open up a host file. This is on Windows. You should be able to find it in Windows System 32 drives, etc, and hosts file. I'm gonna add the local IP address, which is, well, I'm gonna still target localhost, although I will be able to use a reverse proxy like Caddy or Nginx or IIS or something like that to basically route it back into my localhost application. So we want to go to this IP address from, let's say, our identity app, which is gonna sit on not company but company local, something like that. Let's go ahead and actually, you can see I'm trying to save it, but it keeps saying, oh, it's not allowed, I'm gonna retry as admin, man. But yeah, anyway, we have the identity and we have the API, or let's just call it app, and we'll save this. So retry as admin, and this should change, right? So that is saved. If I try and reach any of these websites at the moment, I think nothing will happen. So let's go ahead and try that. Let's do that. And there we go. It's more of a search rather than an actual website. But yeah, if I try to go here, nothing is actually going to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. I'm gonna create a new caddy file. And if you don't know what caddy is, it's essentially a reverse proxy, which is really simple to use. You don't have to name it caddy file, but actually, I mean, I'm gonna put the links down in the description, but this is what this is going to look like. So you can go into something like documentation. Again, it's an executable, you download it, you set the path, etc. And we take a look at the reverse proxy option. You can do it either from the command line, or you can do something like this inside a caddy file. I just know that what I can do is I can say, for this domain, let's go ahead and reverse proxy to something like local host, and my local host connection for the identity app will be this. And actually I'm going to opt in for the HTTP one. Let's place this over here. And then I think if we go into the solution root, I'm just going to use caddy start. This should automatically pick up the caddy file. This should run no problem. So let's come back here. We will retry this, and here we are. So we're targeting identity now. Let's copy this. We will paste this over here. We will now look for the app, right? Because app is right here. So app company local. This is going to be our website, and this is going to be targeting our API, which is on port 5240. So let's place this over here. I will have to restart caddy. So let's go ahead and exit here. Start it again. And it didn't start. I think that's because there's a little bit of a difference between starting and running. Running is a blocking thing. Starting is started in the background and then just runs in the background. So the fact that I pressed Ctrl+C really didn't do anything. Let's go ahead and stop this now. After this is stopped, right, I'll just do caddy run. So now if I exit, it should be okay. All right. So let's come back to our application right here. We have the two localhost applications, and then we have the identity. So let's go ahead and duplicate this, and we're going to use app. And here's the hello world from the API app. I'm going to go ahead and close the two applications here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the application cookies. So I don't have anything here, right? So no cookies just yet. If I try to reach the protected endpoint, I'm going to get redirected to the login. And if I try to reach the login page, everything's all right. So again, in the network tab, I should have the set cookie to this domain. Let's go ahead and check which domain it is. And specifically, it is still identity.company.local. So you can see that it also includes the subdomain. If I go to my app company.local, right, so another subdomain, again, you will not run into this problem if you're just company.local and you don't have subdomains, then you're just separating by route. At that point, you should already be fine. But here you will notice that it's not actually finding the domain. So let's go ahead and change our application to issue a cookie on a specific domain. So here we will go ahead and provide the options or the builder on the cookie. We can set the domain, and this will come ideally from your configuration or something like that. And we want .company.local. This should restart this first application. So let's go ahead and re-log in. Now we have two cookies, one for company.local and one for identity.company.local. So let's go ahead and remove that one. And with this one, if we refresh, we now see that we have company.local. So if we try to hit protected, we're actually going to be able to hit it. So this is the initial setup that you will have to do for this. Obviously, when you're deploying it, if you need a more secure store rather than something like Stack Exchange Redis, if you want to use some Azure store or something like that, if your box is relatively secure, you know, just persist it to the file system. If you have a low-key application, chances are you're not a target for hacking. But from here on out, basically the regular rules for building up authentication and authorization basically still apply. You're gonna get the same claims principle on your app as you have generated on the identity, and well, just reuse your authentication knowledge, right? This will be it for this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe. Don't forget to leave a comment if you have any questions. Big thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Your support is very much appreciated. If you're not supporting me yet, please consider. Stay healthy and goodbye.